Okay, hello BWIB members. To this week we are going into a deep dive into the tech industry for week 8, brought to you by the wonderful members of our tech committee. So hello, I am Crystal. I am the director of the technology committee.
Hi, I'm Lulu. I'm the one of the managers, of the technology committee.
Hi, I'm Malik. I'm the other manager.
And the three of us will be sharing a lot of information about the tech industry, about from what careers there are in the industry, recruitment, and some tips and resources for anyone who's interested in getting a career in this field. So the outline for this meeting, we have an introduction, and then we'll have example careers of what areas of tech you are able to go into for both technical and non-technical roles, some pros and cons about the technology field, a few recruitment timelines, and other various information that could be useful when you do go to recruit for these roles, and finally, some tips and resources, including on-campus organizations to help further your skills and interests, some websites and other articles and whatnot. So we'll start with the introduction. So technology is a pretty broad term. Usually it's used to describe the industry that is focused on innovation, creation, and growth. And there's a lot that can go into technology. So a good way to think about the tech industry and break it down a little bit into something that's a little bit easier to understand is splitting it into businesses and consumers in terms of who the user is. So for example, with consumers, you have goods such as mobile devices, wearable tech, electronics, and then on the business side, it doesn't have to be a technology firm. A lot of businesses use their own technology and their own systems to run their everyday operations, and that is another aspect of technology that you can see yourself going into. So like I said, the technology field spans a lot of different topics. A lot of the most common fields or subfields that you will hear when you're talking about tech is things like web development, data, information technology, AI. These are a lot of terms that are usually thrown around, but they can seem very technical, and it might make you feel a bit overwhelmed if you're not a CS major or if you're not from a super technical background. However, if you still want to be in the technology field, but you think that you're not very skilled at coding or coding's just not for you, don't worry. There's a lot of other roles that are in the tech industry that are still a bit technical, but not as software development heavy or focused, such as product, digital marketing, UX, UI design, and we'll dive more into these options later on. There are also your typical business roles within tech firms, such as finance, operations, business development. That includes human resources, all those typical business roles within the tech firm. So if you do want to work in tech but stay on the business side, these are some options for you. At BWIB Tech, we focus on 5 main topics within the technology field, and these 5, we think, pretty much cover a good chunk of the technology industry, and they're pretty versatile. So if you are within one aspect or focus of one of the topics that we cover, you can easily transition into another topic pretty easily, or another field that we don't have listed here. So some of the topics that we cover are data analysis and science, data science, UX UI design, technology consulting, product, that includes product design, development, marketing and management, and also AI and machine learning. With the technical workshop series, Lulu has been bringing in a bit more on coding work. So especially for people who want to be a bit more technical and go for those software development roles, we are slowly introducing more, technical, more coding side of resources to help you guys out.
Okay, so now we're going to take a closer look into technical and non-technical roles in the tech industry, as well as the technical skills that are necessary for these roles. The tech industry, like Crystal said, is really broad and very variegated. And because of this, tons of different kinds of roles are considered to be under this so-called tech industry. Um, there are different types of technology firms, different types of technology in general, and also different types of technical skills that can make you successful in the industry. So knowing what type of firm you want to work at and your field of interest and your skill set might help you narrow down just exactly what you want to do within the industry if you're interested in tech. So some examples of different types of firms include a tech company like Apple or Facebook versus a firm that uses technology, or what is sometimes referred to as a consumer of technology, and this can basically be any company. Some possible fields within the industry are they can range from biotech to developing the technology behind what powers cars and automobiles to the technology that is artificial intelligence to design. There's tons of different fields of interest. Also, some examples of the skill sets are coding languages, which you could use to become a software developer. This would be learning something like Java, or maybe you want to focus on front-end development and you learn skills like HTML and CSS and JavaScript. You could also have really strong Adobe Creative Cloud skills, which you could use to design, or you could even be a master at Tableau and use those skills to become a data scientist. So as you can see, just saying that you want a tech job is really vague, and it's actually a pretty broad claim. So it'd be useful to kind of start to think about what you specifically see yourself doing so that you can start narrowing in on your skill set and your interests. We have a more extensive presentation in the BWIB drive called Careers in Tech, but in this presentation, I'm going to highlight a few examples as well. So on this slide, we have listed some of the main fields of tech and possible careers within these fields. So I can just touch on a few of them. You could acquire an engineering role, which in tech, one of the most common ones is a software engineer. So if you are a software engineer, you would be working to develop and build the actual computer system software or the application software. You could also obtain a career in sales, service, and support. An example would be being an account manager and managing the sales and relationships between a business that you work for and its particular customers. Another example under this category is a solutions consultant, which would work to help a business sort of just find answers to its questions. You would help a business overcome issues, work to increase its sales, and possibly connect better with the customer base. So you'd basically be analyzing all these issues and trying to better improve the business. Other examples under sales service and support are business partnerships and program managers. There are also marketing and communications roles at tech companies, just like most companies. You'd be working to market their product, image, or mission in areas such as these: digital marketing, brand strategy, sales marketing, or social media marketing. There are careers in product, which we talk about more later on, but a product manager, for example, they would oversee the development of a product or products for an organization, kind of seeing it go from start to finish and guiding just, I guess, its development. You could also be, you could focus on product marketing, you could be a product designer and actually design the products to be sold. There's also careers in design. An example is a UX researcher who they would look and research ways to improve a user's interaction and experience with the company's product and service. And there's even business strategy roles, which for more information on these, the finance and marketing committees would probably have better resources, but we just want to highlight that there are even non-technical roles at tech companies. It's not all just coding or analyzing and all that, but there's also things like marketing and business strategy. But now we're gonna take a deep dive into the careers that we as BWIB Tech cover. So one of the careers that we wanted to focus on was a technology consultant. And what a technology consultant does is they provide technical support, perform troubleshooting functions, and resolve customer issues. So they're basically advising organizations on how to best use technology or improve their use of it already. This requires that they're highly knowledgeable about companies' products or applications. They use the knowledge that they have to assist users, employees, and clients with any issues. So basically, they're working to create the best experience for everyone with the technology. To be a tech consultant, you need to be skilled in organization, teaching, and planning to coordinate with departments to conduct training. You also need to be prepared to review and prepare documents, manuals, and brochures on the capabilities and functions of different apps. So you're basically just guiding the company on what the best way to use the technology is and how to just optimize their success. And another career that we wanted to highlight is being a product manager. So this is actually a pretty popular and sought out role in tech. What a product manager does is they watch over given products from the ideation stage, which is basically when it's simply an idea, to releasing it and keeping it updated and relevant to the market. They also work to channel the company's vision into the product, manage the different stages of development, and keep communication lines open. So they need to have both a knowledge of business strategy and product development and design. Basically, it requires that you're organized and you can drive both these marketing and development teams. They need to recognize also the importance of growth and change with an ever-evolving market and keep their product up to date and just manage all aspects of the product. A third career that we wanted to touch on is the user experience designer. So this is slightly more technical than the last two that we discussed, but business candidates can also apply for it. So it doesn't require what sometimes people call hard skills of like being proficient in a coding language, but it does require some technical skills. The user experience designer would make sure that users can use a product in a frustration-free way. So basically, they work to make sure that, say the product is a website, that someone can go on and log into the website and use it without running into any glitches or anything, and everything runs smoothly. it's a good idea to get some training in UX design first before applying to these positions. And in order to be successful, you often have to tap into the minds of consumers and think about like what would the consumer want when navigating or using the product. You also need to be able to foresee problems and expectations that they'll have, they being the consumer when using the product. And you need to understand how to reach out to consumers. So kind of be in touch with who the consumer is and what they want. And if you're not, then you need to be able to reach out and to get in touch. Another career that we think is awesome is the data analyst. So data analysts, they go through data to gain market and consumer info. So they find questions and also answers to business decision. They find questions business decision makers need answers, and they also look to answer these questions. They format and transfer technical data to provide answers in business language. So they also kind of, to be this role, you would need to have an understanding of business strategy and business, but also have these data analytics skills. So you're kind of working to apply your knowledge of business to the insights that you find from your number crunching or your data analysis. But what you would do with what you find is you draw conclusions on how company can use this information to move forward. Like I said, you communicate between technical and business people. So this is kind of going back to where it's that a little bit of a dual skill set between business knowledge and technical skills. And some of the technical skills required would be things like SQL or Python. And you can use these languages to gain the insights and the technical knowledge. A last career that we wanted to touch on was the software developer. So this is one of the more technical jobs, as Crystal was saying earlier. Software developers can be responsible for the entire development process of a software program. They can determine user requirements, design the program, and write code. So software developers, they need to be able to code, and this position is often subdivided into both back-end and front-end roles. And back-end developers, they work to program kind of the behind-the-scenes stuff of a website, perhaps like working with the server and how the site stores its data and things like that. Where a front-end developer, they would design the website, basically code everything that the user sees. But in either way, you're going to work with a team of programmers. You'll often collaborate on code with a collaboration site such as GitHub, where you'll be working on some code, you'll push it to this website, and then one of your teammates can pull it and make some edits, and you'll go through processes like that to work together with other programmers. So if you're interested, it could help to read up on any aspect of the industry that you find interesting, and this could kind of get you familiar with the technical lingo and get a feel for what's out there. Also, it is important to note that most developers do have a few years of formal education, but it is possible to start learning on your own. There are a ton of websites that offer free coding courses. One of my favorites is Udemy. It's super useful. I actually took this class called the Complete 2020 Web Development Bootcamp, which I would definitely recommend. I think there's one called Code Academy. So yeah, if you're interested, you can just Google free coding resources, and I'm sure something would pop up. And yeah, it could be fun to start learning on your own. But also, to tie in business again, tech companies do want developers who are also business people. So developers who understand business strategy and can apply that to their designs, and the development of their software is super smiled upon, I guess you could say. So yeah, those are the careers that we wanted to touch on as BWIB Tech.
All right, now we are going to go into the pros and cons of a career in the technology field. And just to note, these are a few points about working in the industry in general. Within each specific role, they will have, there's their own set of pros and cons. So working as a data analyst or scientist versus a UX or UI designer. Each role has their own set of pros and cons, but these are just some that we thought would be useful about talking about the industry as a whole. Otherwise, this presentation would go on for hours. So going on, some pros are a lot of tech jobs are very are well-paying jobs. So coming out of college, coming out with a degree in a technical field, you will be set up for a very good start to your career. There's great job security. You're always learning. Since every project is different, not everything's the same. You're going to find yourself in a lot of situations where you're learning new things all the time. There's a variety of tech roles, like Lulu just mentioned before. There's a whole bucket load of different roles within the tech industry that you could choose from. And going off of what we said earlier, there are a lot of roles that allow you to have a technical role in any industry. So like we said, within biotech or even accounting, there's accounting firms that have their own technical role where each accounting firm has their own specific system or software that they're using, and they need technical people to run it. So essentially you can work in tech wherever you want. There's a lot of opportunities for career growth. So after your first job, you can essentially pick and choose what job you want next or where you want to go, whether you want to stay in that firm or choose a different endeavor to pursue. It's a fast-growing industry, which means there is going to be a lot more jobs that will open up in terms of once new research comes up on different technology industries, and once other technologies are more familiarized or I guess finalized, such as AI, AR, VR. Once those are more polished up, you can definitely see growth in those subsectors of tech as well. And your work is pretty meaningful since, like we said before, the industry is all about innovation and creation and growth. And you can for sure be contributing to society's push forward. Some cons are that the job can be quite stressful in that there's a high learning curve, especially for those of you who aren't extremely technical. Jumping into the tech industry can seem overwhelming since your tech terms are thrown at you all the time and you're expected to know a lot before you jump in. So you're learning on the go and you're always learning. So trying to master everything that you are expected to know can be a bit stressful. There's also long and odd hours, although it can be considered a good thing since it's quite flexible. It might not be for everyone. Some people want, their typical 9 to 5, whereas other people, that sort of work style doesn't work for them. So it kind of depends on the person. There's also constant deadlines. So with every project, you have different stages of the project, whether it be in software development or product design or UX UI design. You're not going to, like a project has different stages to complete before moving on to the next stage. So there's always work that you are expected to get done before you move on to the next stage. And if you're not finished, that can hold the project up. There's also not a lot of diversity in the workplace at the moment. This is quite unfortunate, which means for a lot of people, it might be a bit harder to break into the industry. Hopefully that can change in the future, and that could be a good thing. But at the moment, usually, stereotypically, within the tech industry, there's, sort of one look that you have to have, but we're working to change that here at BWIB Tech. There's also a lot of screen time, so if you're not one to stare at a screen the whole day, especially since a lot of work is being digitized these days, you're kind of not really able to run away from the screen. So if that's not something that you want, then maybe a role in the tech industry is not for you. And like I said before, it's quite hard to break into the field without any technical knowledge or experience. So what I would recommend is, if you are looking to get a role in the tech industry, read up on it, and at least know some of the terminology being thrown around within that subsector. If you know what area you want to work in or what role you want, start surrounding yourself with in an environment that talks about it. So if you want to be a data scientist, surround yourself with people who talk about data and in a data environment, and you'll pick up on the terminology. And if you can speak to it, it will be a good look for you when you go to recruit.
Okay, hello. So I will be picking up this recruitment section. So first things for recruiting in tech, the first thing you should do is most definitely start early. Start in the fall. You can even start in August. That's when most internships will come out. Something to be aware of though is that they won't necessarily all come out at the same time. They might come out like across the span of fall quarter. Especially different roles, like technical roles might come out first, non-technical roles might come out later. Just be aware, but definitely start early. And then here are some of the dates for the career fairs that are on campus. Okay, here are some application timeline examples. Twitter, for example, the application opens in August, closes in March. Microsoft also opens in August, closes in June. Just, be aware of these different timelines. Also on this note, these are all examples of very large companies, but tech is a lot more than just, the big names. And so when you are recruiting, be mindful that there's lots of great opportunities at smaller companies or at startups. Okay, the first thing you should do when recruiting is identify a role in tech that you're interested in and qualified for. And then once you have that, I would suggest that you also find a similar role, mostly because the number of offerings of like intern positions in specific roles varies a lot across tech companies. So like some companies may have like 5 PM internships, but like 1,000 SWE internships. So you want to like find 2 roles that are closely related and that you're qualified for both, so that you're not like putting all of your eggs in one basket. So like product management and maybe like product marketing are close enough. Product marketing and software engineering, maybe not so much. So be mindful of that. And then also be aware that there are some roles that are both technical and non-technical. So like program manager is one of them. And when you're applying, they might be listed under different roles. And so you should make sure that you apply to the one that's appropriate for you. Another thing is that roles in tech don't always have consistent naming. So like software engineering is an example of something that does have consistent naming, but program manager is something that might not. So like program manager at one company may not be the exact same thing that is at another company. Like Microsoft, for example, a program manager at Microsoft is the equivalent of a product manager elsewhere. So like just be aware of these things. There might be a company that you are very interested in, but you might not find the specific role or roles that you're looking for there because it's not under the name that you're like assuming that it would be. So just be aware of those things. Another thing is that in tech, because there's not a lot of female representation, there are lots of minority-specific opportunities like Microsoft Explore and Google's Bold. These are just good to be aware of and to apply to. Sometimes they have less intensive interview processes. Sometimes they're less competitive in general. Sometimes they just provide more mentorship than other internship programs or full-time programs, and so you should be aware of them. We're working on compiling a list of all the ones that are relevant to tech, so you can be on the lookout for that. And then lastly, when you're in the recruiting process, don't be afraid to ask recruiters for interview prep. There are a lot of little like idiosyncrasies to each company and each role, and sometimes the only way that you're going to know about that is by asking your recruiter. So like before you're like on site, or before your first like phone interview, ask the recruiter for like maybe like a 5, 10, 15-minute call, just like talk about what to expect. And that I have found is very useful in calming nerves and also just being prepared. And then the next tip for recruitment is to develop relationships with upperclassmen and alumni who work in the same role or company that you want to. Really, this is for not only the guidance, but also the potential for a referral. As you may know, in tech, there's this like kind of popular approach to recruiting, which is like mass applying, like applying to like hundreds of internships. I don't know if this is necessarily the case in other industries, but like it's pretty rampant in tech. And so it's just easy, no matter how qualified you are, to get lost in the sea of applications, especially if like the company's using like ATS or something like that, that just, you know, it's not even a human who's crawling through resumes. But a referral will almost guarantee that a recruiter will take a like long look at your resume and you won't just get filed away by some like automatic system, and that usually it ends up in an interview. But this is good to be aware of. Okay, now I'm going to talk about kind of like the interview process for different roles. So the first like cluster of roles that we're talking about is finance, operations, and business development. And these roles are almost always non-technical. Here's an outline of like the knowledge that they might expect of you to have, so like accounting, business intuition, and then a few basics about the interviews. Okay, so I'll go into the specifics of a role within this like cluster of roles, which is like product strategy and operations, or product strategy, product operations. Good resources for preparing for interviews within this role are the same resources for PM interviews, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then also Swipe to Unlock, just because a lot of people who are usually interviewing for these roles are not necessarily technical, so it's good to like get up to speed on the technical terminology, and Swipe to Unlock does that very well. Okay, so for strategy and operations, the questions are like case-esque to some extent, and then also kind of like PM questions. So like as opposed to like in consulting, case-ish questions in tech are more focused on like the product and its customers, so like the feature set, market entry, implementing and delivering and maintaining the product. An example question could be like, Jupyter Notebook is launching a kid-friendly counterpart to its primary product offering. How do you launch it, make appropriate changes to it, and to maintain its success? And so that question, I've gotten a question along the lines of that. And then the other types of questions I've received are like kind of like bundled into either like leadership, problem solving, or project management. Usually leadership is pretty behavioral. It gives something along the lines of like, tell me about a challenge you overcame, or why this role specifically, or like what types of problems do you like enjoy solving. And then problem solving might be about like process or product improvement. So one example is like, how would you change the grocery checkout process to optimize for speed? I've also been asked, how would you change airport security to optimize for speed? They could be pretty open-ended. Really what they're looking for here is your thought process and how you break down like ambiguous problems that are like not very like well, whose scope is not well defined. And then the last category of question is project management, which is like really they're like looking for your prioritization and communication. So a good example of this is like you're having trouble convincing a cross-functional team to adopt your proposed solution. How do you address this? And then like you would answer with like probably like a story about a past experience or just like your strategy in general. And so then to further elaborate on how this interview like structure might go, I interviewed for a product operations and strategy role at a relatively large tech company, and I first had a 45-minute like case-ish question over video, and then I was invited on site, and I had 3 30 to 45-minute back-to-back interviews, and then I would characterize each interview as like one was like leadership based, one was problem solving based, and the other was project management based. And you may be wondering, like, in these roles, do people expect you to know like SQL or Excel? And they might, but I can tell you, when I was interviewing, I was literally asked, do you know SQL? And like at the time, I really didn't know SQL, and I was like, no, I don't. And I mean, I wasn't asked anything further beyond that, and I got the offer. So like what they're looking for more in these roles is like your thought process and like how you approach and solve problems and how you work with people who are like in different roles, since it is like pretty collaborative across roles, as opposed to like maybe like engineering, where like you might only be working with like other engineers or other designers. Yeah, so my advice here would be to prepare for interviews for roles of this nature with like case questions adopted to tech to some extent, but mostly with PM questions, and of course like the behavioral questions that go along with almost every interview. Of course, like when I say PM questions, I'm excluding technical as in coding, but you could expect to get like estimation questions, like for example, how many iPhones are sold in the US every month? You know, that's definitely like a question that you could get for this kind of role. Next, we're going to talk about marketing recruiting. So marketing recruiting in tech isn't really going to differ that much from, I guess, like traditional marketing recruiting. The only thing is that when you're preparing for those interviews, like obviously like the context of all the questions is going to be probably mostly surrounding tech products, like software-based products or hardware-based products. Some like sample questions are, consider product X. What are some strengths and opportunities you see with it? And like that's like, you know, your basic like SWOT analysis. Something else is like pick a physical product you enjoy using. Articulate the value proposition for me. What segments does it target, and what's an example ad campaign you might come up with to market it? Another question you might get is like, what's your favorite like product campaign? For marketing, it's incredibly unlikely that you'll be getting any technical questions. Actually, I'm very confident that you won't be asked anything technical. Okay, next we have recruiting for UI UX. The key thing here is your portfolio. That's just like the central part of your application. And also like after you've applied and you've been selected for an interview, that will also become a central part of one of your interviews. So kind of how UI UX interviews will go is that you might have like a first round kind of like interview that like focuses on your work and projects or just like your past experiences. Then within that interview, you'll probably be asked about your design process, your design thinking, because like communication and like process and thought is like really what's like central to UI UX. So certain questions you might get are, please tell me about a project you recently worked on. walk me through the thought process. Why did you choose your target user group, and how do you think the research phase influenced the design process? So when it comes to these questions, you should be very, very familiar with like the whole design process, right? So like translating the results of user research and the identified like user needs and all those aspects into a like prototype or like the appropriate handoff to give to engineering. Which is why process is so incredibly important. You may also be asked to do like an app critique. So maybe like in a separate segment of an interview, you might be asked like, okay, critique Spotify, like what are your thoughts on it? What would you improve? What would you change? And why? And it's very important to be justifying your answers and like demonstrating your thought process. And then below we have links to a very good interview guide and then kind of like an example of somebody's interview process in terms of design. Next, we have recruiting for product. And here we're going to focus on product management. So here's kind of just like an overview of maybe like the structure of the interviews that you might get. I can tell you this past recruiting cycle, I recruited for APM internships, and how it started for me was the first interview was a phone interview that was mostly product questions, but none of them were technical. So they were like, what's your favorite product? Or how would you leverage this product capacities to improve this process? It's usually about 45 minutes long, and then like the questions like might compound on each other. So like if you like suggest certain change, they might follow up with that change you suggest and be like, okay, well, what metrics would you use to measure the success of that change? And then after that, you'll probably have a like take-home assignment, and this take-home assignment can like really be anything. Like it might be a feature proposal, or it might be like a design challenge. I mean, it could be anything. I was asked to design a library, and then like I had like to like create like documentation for like why this library would be designed in this way and like what features it would have and pricing and all the things like go along with that. And I was given about 3 days to complete it. And then after that, I had an on-site interview, which consisted of 2 more like product-based interviews and then a technical interview. And then now I'm going to go into kind of like the nature of those questions. Oh, so first, very good resources for product are Decode and Conquer, Cracking the PM interview, and the Product Manager interview. Like holy grail books, must reads for sure. But yeah, this is product management, but it's also relevant to some extent to like the roles we talked about earlier, like, sorry, my bad. Strategy and operations, and to some extent marketing, and also to some extent UI UX. Okay, so the first type of question that we'll go into is technical. So not every company is going to ask PMs to like be technical, but most will. So it's good to know your like basics of like SWE interviews. So like that means like algorithms and data structures, but also like system design. With that being said, obviously nowhere near the level of expectations for a software engineer, but you should know these basics. So like if you're like very, very serious about like recruiting for a PM and being a PM, I would highly recommend that you take like introductory CS like 31, 32, or like pick 10A, pick 10B. That's kind of like the best way that you're going to learn these things. Way easier, in my opinion, than like taking the time to teach yourself, and you'll make it by being in these classes, you'll make sure that you cover all the topics. The only thing that you're probably need to teach yourself is like system design, but the system design primer guide on GitHub is very, very good. Some questions you might receive are like explain recursion, or write an algorithm that detects meeting conflicts, or how would you reduce Gmail storage size. So you can see they're not the level of like difficulty of like questions for like SWEs, but like you should still be technical enough to like articulate the answers for these. For most companies, at least, like I can tell you, Google most definitely gives you a technical interview. Also, if you are technical, like if you're like, not even necessarily like a CS major, like if there's any like reason for them to believe that you wouldn't have the capacity to answer these questions, you will likely be expected to answer these questions. But some companies, of course, also you don't need to be technical at all. Other sorts of technical questions are analytical. These are obviously nowhere near as technical as like the writing code ones. Oh, also, for PM interviews, you might not actually like physically write code. Like you might just like write pseudocode. The syntax and all those like specifics, like expectations, again, very, very, very different and much lower than that of like software engineering. Anyways, for analytical questions, you might get like an estimation question. So like, how many searches are made on Google Maps every 20 minutes? Or like pricing, like how would you price the Kindle Fire? And then metrics, like what metrics would you use to evaluate the success of X feature or product? And then product questions kind of go under like one of two things, like design and improving, roughly. So an example of like a design question might be like, how do you design a social and career networking website for entrepreneurs? How do you design Google Maps for blind users? Something about like improving products might be like, how would you improve your favorite product? Or we're considering adding a new feature to Amazon Prime while continuing to price at $99 a year. What should the additional feature be? And then something to keep in mind is that like these questions don't come like in categories, right? Like the interview is not going to be like, oh, now I'm going to ask you a product design question. And when they ask you a question, usually they like follow up on that question. So like a follow up to the Amazon one could be like, broadly, how do you go about implementing, this additional feature, or what data points would you use to evaluate success? So like be prepared for like one question to become like 7. But yeah, and then, okay, so this was by no means an exhaustive list of PM questions, but it was like roughly the main ones. There are a million combinations and variations of them, and they differ sometimes by company. A good way to prepare for PM interview questions, of course, is to like read the books that I mentioned earlier, and then also is to like in your daily life, like everything around you is like products, right? Like think of all the products that you use and like evaluate and critique them like regularly, and that way like when like you get to the interview and somebody asks you like what's your favorite product and like why and what would you do to change it, like all these answers like come to mind quickly. And like when you get in the habit of evaluating, critiquing all the products around you, like you're just a lot more like aware and you have a lot more like creative and insightful things to say. That being said, the like, specific criteria that they look at to evaluate your answers to these questions is not like, oh, how great was his idea, or like how creative, or like, like there's a specific set of criteria that like involve like how you handle priorities and how you articulate your ideas, and that's more so how you're evaluated as opposed to like specifically the interestingness of your answer. Yeah, and those books go into all of those like I guess evaluation points really well. And then lastly, I'll talk about recruiting for data science / analytics. Data science, again, may have some of the elements of product in terms of like maybe like estimation questions, or like what metrics you would develop to evaluate the success of a feature or a product, or like some specific like quality, I would say, of the product. But I'm going to quickly go over the technical questions you might expect if you're applying for a data science role. So like kind of falls under like 3 buckets, like one like statistics, another is programming, third is like databases. So an example statistics question would be like, what are some alternative models to linear regression? Why are they better or worse? These just really test your kind of like statistical knowledge. And then programming, again, you might get like a classic algorithm and data structure question that's like known to squeeze, but it's usually much lower expectations, and you can usually write in pseudocode. And then lastly, you probably might get a question about databases. So like usually it'll be something like a given table. Then you need to write some kind of query to get like the values that you want or organize the data in the way that's being asked of you. And yeah, that's mostly it for data science interview questions.
Okay, so I'm going to take it from here since technology consulting is a role that I'm currently recruiting for, so I do have some insight about this role. So like most consulting roles or any business-esque role, you will have an application and a resume drop. From there, you might be invited to a first round interview. Usually for UCLA, this happens on campus, and it's back-to-back interviews with senior consultants. So sometimes you'll have the behavioral interview first, or sometimes you'll have it after. It kind of depends on the rotation of applicants who are coming in. So you'll have a behavioral interview, and that's just talking about your experience, and they'll also ask you questions about the industry and company specifics. So why do you want to work at that company? The next interview that comes either before or after, just depends, is the technical case interview. And this is slightly different from your normal typical consulting case, market sizing, profit case. So what I would recommend is that in the shared drive, we do have a presentation on this, and we did do a workshop on a technical case earlier this quarter. So I would highly recommend you check that out if you're interested in this role, as that will better prepare you by letting you see what types of questions they'll ask and how you would respond. Technical cases do require you to have some knowledge on technologies in general. So whether that be within data or within machine learning or this and that, you can't really predict what kind of question they'll ask. So you do have to be generally aware of technology trends currently happening. And from there, if you make it to the final round interviews, that usually happens at the office, and you are given a technical case where you'll be typically given around 30 minutes to read through the case and make a deliverable on how to solve the issue being presented, and then you'll have about 15 minutes for a presentation with a partner at the company. So within that 15 minutes, it will be probably 10 minutes of actual presenting, and then another 5 minutes at the very end for any questions, or sometimes they'll throw in some behavioral questions just to make you less nervous. So finally, we'll move on to tips and resources, and these are just some of the resources that we have gathered. Of course, there are a lot more. These are kind of more general tips and resources, so we don't necessarily have resources on this presentation for specific roles, because we do have, within the shared drive in the technology committee folder, we do have presentations for those specific roles with more resources there. So I would highly recommend you check those out as well. So some on-campus organizations, the thing with these organizations is although they are within tech, they do have their own subfield of tech that they work within. So for example, Bruin Ventures, they work with startups and technology companies, and kind of like consulting as well, and venture capitalism. And Nova, on the other hand, works by creating applications for nonprofits. So they each have their own specific subsector of tech that they work within. So we would highly recommend you check them out and see what suits you or what is of interest to you. And we have linked what we can on the slides for you guys. So here are some more. Product space, obviously for products. Bruin Game Studios, if you're super into studio games and creating games. The Data Science Union, if you're super into data science. Again, we've linked everything for you guys. And then some other campus orgs that we were unfortunately unable to find links for, but we did look up on the student org page, our Bruin Digital Strategy and Bruin Smart Solutions, etc. Some articles we found while creating this deck that we found were helpful are listed here. Medium is a site with a bunch of articles on a lot of different topics, especially if you are interested in design, UX, UI design. They have a ton of topics and a lot of articles there. There's a lot of books that could be of a good resource to you as well, and one of them is Swipe to Unlock. It's a great book that we, all of us at BWIB Tech enjoy, so we highly recommend it there too. And again, industry-specific articles can be found on our presentations in the shared drive. We have also listed some newsletters and podcasts that could help you be better prepared if you are just starting out and want to dive into tech. These newsletters and podcasts will help surround yourself in a more tech environment. So when someone talks about, artificial intelligence or Tableau or SQL or whatnot, you'll have a better understanding of these technologies and of these terms if you were to read all of these. So we would highly recommend you guys do that. Some final tips. No matter how technical the role, be well read on tech terminology if you want to work in the industry. Again, it is a good look to you if you know what you're talking about. So that will give you a heads up or give you more of an advantage while recruiting. Keep up to date on tech trends. This kind of plays on to that first point. Again, if you can keep your eye out on what's happening in the tech world, that is also a good sign. Technology is really broad, so like we said before, we would highly recommend you figure out what area of technology suits your interests and your skills. That will make recruiting life a lot easier. And if you're not sure, we would recommend you start looking now, since us at BWIB Tech, we can't really do that for you. So whatever your interests and skills are, this will help you in the long run. Work on projects, personal or professional, it doesn't really matter. Especially if you're going into the tech field, having some sort of experience will make you look a lot more, will make you a better candidate for that role that you're going for. Be confident in your interviews. So these are normal people that you're talking to. There's nothing, there shouldn't be anything scary about talking to a partner or talking to people within the firm. From personal experience, it is best if you just treat them like normal conversations. As long as you're respectful and you're having intelligent conversations, you will do fine within interviews. And always, always, always ask questions, get feedback on your work, and seek help if you need to. Everyone's here to help you. All you have to do is just ask for that help. So if you have any questions, feel free to email BWIB directly after, since we aren't here to answer any questions or specific questions for you guys. Always feel free to reach out to us. Yeah, this has been BWIB's Tech Deep Dive into the technology industry. Again, my name is Crystal. I'm the director of the technology committee, along with
Lulu, one of the managers of the committee.
And Malik, I'm the other manager.
Yep, so feel free to reach out to any one of us with more questions, as each one of us has our own experiences within certain areas of tech, and we would be more than happy to help you guys. And that is all for today.